So how I would like to begin is just with a quick introduction to Commandments 1 and 2. So if you have your Bibles, or maybe, I don't know, open up another tab to Bible Gateway or some sort of online Bible, and look up Deuteronomy 20, 7 and 8. It's 20, right?
I have Exodus 20.
Okay. It's actually the same.
It's the same.
They pretty much copy and pasted because they wanted to restate the rules. So yeah, Exodus 20, 7 and 8. For whatever reason, I didn't put the chapter.
No, not 7 and 8.
No, it's not? Oh, okay.
Exodus 20, verse 1.
Oh, okay, verse 1. In Deuteronomy, it's a little bit different, but I forget which chapter it is in Deuteronomy. It's not on my notes for some reason. The first one is, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love and keep my commandments. So, what is the first commandment that the Lord gives his people Israel, and in many ways us today? It is to have no other gods before him, before Jehovah, right? And then the second one is don't have any idols, right? Because back in the day, and in many even cultures and religions today, there's a strong practice of making little statues that would represent, or that would sometimes even be, the people's God. Now, since we can't have any gods before him, can we have gods after him? Is that what this is saying? Like, God needs to be number one, but it's okay to have like Allah as number 2 or Buddha as number 3. Like, is that what this means? No, this is a resounding no. What the rule is stating is that you are only supposed to state what the rule is stating is that you are only supposed to worship the one true God. Israel had always understood that their God, the Creator God, referred to in the ancient languages as either Yahweh or Jehovah, was alone worthy of being worshipped. Now, while there were not other gods, quote unquote, as we would use the word today, there are definitely evil spirits, right? We sometimes refer to them as evil spirits or dark powers or demons. And when you look at the whole story of the Bible, you can see that these bad entities, like Satan and all of his followers, would either manifest themselves as false gods, or give the lies of a false god, or, people would just run crazy with their own imagination, right? Oh, thunder, that's weird and powerful. Maybe there's a god behind that, right? So it's a mix of those two things. But that's why it's so important to only worship God, because you're either going to end up worshiping your own ideas and your own thoughts, or something demonic. Now, shall not make carved images. Commandment number 2. Does this mean we can't make art? Because it sounds like this rule. If you're first time reading it, you're like, I can't make statues of animals or humans or fish or paintings. I mean, I get why I can't bow down to them. That makes sense. What's going on here? Well, it's not that God is against art. I would say God is pro-art and pro-creativity. It's that second part, right? It says, do not do these things. Do not make these carved images. Do not make these paintings. And then do not bow down to them. So those two parts are supposed to be connected. Do not bow down. Do not worship these idols that you make for yourself. Now, I have invited Miss McBrien onto the stage today. And what we're going to do, probably for a lot of these chapels, not necessarily just Miss McBrien, I'm going to have other people come as well. But, I want to create a dialogue. And hopefully, we got some good back and forth. And, talking through these two commandments together can help us both. And then also you guys understand them a little bit better as well. So to begin, Ms. McBrien, I'm sure that you have taught just about everyone on the call, but maybe not. And, maybe in different math classes, you've had more time to talk about your own life and your own testimony. Maybe in other ones you haven't. So just, at the beginning, who are you and how did you become a Christian?
Well, little background. This is my 4th year teaching here at ICS Lima. And I have taught a lot of you. I haven't taught some of you students in middle school. I teach secondary math, so Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Business Math, and then I also teach Bible 11. So if you are in 6th or 7th grade, you may have me in the coming years. As far as my background, I grew up in a Christian home, and I'm very thankful to have parents who really instilled in me biblical truths, but they made it very much a option or a choice. They made it very clear that their faith was not what was going to save me. It was something that I had to choose and follow Christ myself. And so I would say it was probably around my 7th grade year that I really started digging into the Bible, reading it for myself. And that was when I really committed my life to Christ and chose to be baptized. And so that's kind of my background.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. And so now that, we've kind of established a little bit more about who you are. And so while you were prepping for this interview, dialogue, conversation, podcast thing, what did you think? What did the Holy Spirit reveal to you, or just, through different resources? What do you believe that we can learn about God from Commandment 1? The thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Yeah. So as Mr. Fry mentioned, right, the 10 Commandments are mentioned twice in the Old Testament, but they're referred back to all throughout the Bible. It's not just like a standalone passage. And I think it's really important to remember that the first commandment gives us guidance for the rest of the commandments. And we may get into this later, but a lot of scholars sum up the first 5 commandments as kind of vertical, like how to have good relationship with God, and those expectations. And then commandments 6 through 10 are how to have good relationship with others. And really, without the first commandment, the others aren't going to work, or really even set us apart differently from other religions or other just good moral people. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind as far as the first commandment goes.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. I'm glad you brought up the way that they're divided, right? Mm-hmm. You got the first 4.
You could argue 5.
5, yeah, which is, definitely, our relationship with God. How do we operate with Him, right? And then the others are about how do we operate with each other. Thanks for bringing that up. Now, I think I've been over to your place before, where you and some of the other teachers live, and I didn't really see any idols. I didn't really see any statues. I didn't, no Molochs, no Baals, no, not even a cute little fat Buddha, which the whole Buddha thing. I mean, if it can be okay, it cannot be okay, but we'll just, Moloch, Buddha, Baal. I didn't really see any idols, right? So, how does Commandment 2 apply to our lives today?
Well, obviously, as you mentioned, right? Carved images is what Commandment 2 is talking about. But it's more about the bowing down and serving or worshiping is what the issue is, not with having, a picture or a painting. And we worship man-made things every day, whether it be a TV, some people really enjoy books. I love to read. We can worship books or other people, authors, video games, really anything that we put priority over God can turn into an idol.
Yeah. So it's not just about, having these ancient statues or paintings or whatever. It's more about, what are we putting before God in our own lives, in our own hearts. Awesome. So kind of a jumping off question off of that. Why do you think God cares so much about this, right? Why is, as I think it's like the first commandment says, or no, I think it's the second one as well. Why is he jealous? Why does he care so much about if we're worshiping other people or other things? Why isn't he more chill about all that?
Well, again, context is really key, and it's always important when you're reading the Bible to read verses in context. And in Exodus 20, verses 1 and 2, we're reminded that God is saying these words, and he says before the commandments, he says, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." And so it's putting into context and reminding us, of his power and his goodness and how he has taken this chosen people who he promised, right, to Abraham, that he would bless all nations, right? It's not just the Israelites, so us included. And so it's putting that into context of why we should serve him and why he is a jealous God. Also, we have kind of a different understanding of jealousy as opposed to what it's really context here, right? Like we think of jealousy of like wanting something that someone else has kind of. And in many ways, that's what God is saying. He loves us so much that he wants us to love him back over other things.
Yeah, it's something that I've had people at my church ask me, like, why is it okay for God to be jealous? Like, what's going on there? And I think part of it is, I think there are some emotions or sentiments that we as humans mess up a lot more easily than others. And we normally think of others as almost always good. But if you love your girlfriend or your boyfriend or TV more than God, then that love is a sin. Love isn't always holy or righteous, right? And so I think there is a way that we could also be jealous in a sanctified, in a holy way, right? I think, think about, our parents or a married couple. It would be a little bit weird if the husband and wife weren't to some degree jealous for each other, right? Or it would be a little weird if, your parents didn't treat you, your parents literally treated you the same as any other kid, right? They're supposed to love you in a different way, a special way, and protect us in a little bit more of a different way. And in some ways, we can almost define that as jealousy. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And so it's not, but I think jealousy is so easily messed up by us in our world today, and leads to a lot of machismo. But really, I don't know if there is like one emotional state that is always sinful. Because even God is a God of wrath, and we know that God is holy. So there has to be a way that we can be angry without sin. Now, kind of following off of that, here in Peru and around, a lot of Latin American and Catholic-based countries, or I guess even in Protestantism and evangelicalism, we love our Jesus movies, right? We love our Jesus paintings. So what about like modern paintings of God or even Jesus? Do you think that those are okay, or do you think that those might be in violation of commandment 2?
I don't know if paintings really are as applicable, but I know a common thing within Christian culture right now that people are talking about is the series The Chosen. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It was a crowd-funded series. There's been 2 so far. You can watch it on YouTube. And there was some discussion of whether or not it was, biblical, because the creators are creatively depicting the story of Jesus and in the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke. And again, it goes back to Commandment 1, you shall have no other God before me. And always remembering that the only truth that's 100% true comes from biblical text. And so it can be great and it can be helpful to watch, videos or see a painting and interact with that to help you gain another understanding. But it's always important to go back to the text. And that's true with just any sort of book or even commentary, or if you're listening to a pastor or a podcast, right? You should always be double checking. Even I tell my students this when I'm teaching Bible, like, read the text. Don't just believe me, right? Always go back to the text and to the fact that we shall have no other God before. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. It seems like lately on Facebook, there's been a lot of conversation about different paintings of Jesus, especially by Western. This is a surprise question. This wasn't on our list, but I just thought of it while we were talking. Of Western, European, American painters painting Jesus to look a little bit more like me than he probably would historically accurate be. And that can be one of the downfalls, right? That can be one of the negative things of having these paintings, having these depictions of Jesus, is we get a false idea about what he looked like. So in your experience, having lived in Peru for 4 years, and where you taught before was very multicultural, how could these hinder or even help students or Christians as they grow? These different depictions of Jesus, how could they maybe even misguide us?
Well, again, culture and context of culture is important in knowing, that Jesus was, a Hebrew person, and what his ethnicity was. Knowing some of the history behind why paintings depict him in a certain way is something that I would encourage you guys to research. It's kind of interesting how, unfortunately, there was not great Christian history of people taking and imposing their culture. And this has happened, unfortunately, throughout history in lots of countries, whether it be in the Middle East or in Europe or even in the United States, and here in Peru. I remember seeing recently a Last Supper painting, but it was depicted as if it happened in Pucallpa, and they were eating cuy and fish. And it was really interesting because you could tell that the painter's intent was to bring in the culture. And I think there's beauty in that, but also understanding, right, how it actually does connect to the Bible. And again, always go back to the text and understanding.
Yeah, I would agree. There is something really cool in a podcast I was listening to a few months ago. One of the guys was talking about this, where in a lot of different cultures, when Jesus is introduced and really catches on fire, people begin to take some creative license, in order to show this is our guy, right? So they could even paint him to look like them, whatever that might be, and make him look a little bit more Asian, and make him look a little bit more African, make him look whatever. right? And, put them in a surrounding that looks a little bit more like their place. And like you were saying, sometimes that can actually be awesome, right? Because Jesus is for everyone. And he applies to every culture, to every race, to every tongue. However, the downside of that is, when, we don't go back to the source material, when we don't go back to, God's words that he's protected in order to give us after 2,000 years, year after year after year, right? When we disrespect it, when we forget that there was creative license, when we forget that he very much purposefully was born out of Israel for very specific reasons. So yeah, it's a good balancing act to practice in our spiritual lives in general. And we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but why do you think commandments 1 and 2 are 1 and 2? Why aren't they, 5 and 6, or why are they so close together?
Yeah. Well, they're closely connected, and they provide context for the rest of the commandments. One of my students, I won't call you out, but in an assignment last week, asked, why don't more countries just use the 10 commandments for their laws? And I would argue that they do. They use, do not kill. Most people would agree that committing adultery is bad, stealing is bad, right? Those, commandments 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all kind of the basis of most countries and societies' laws. But what sets, Christianity and our understanding of our relationship with God and others is that we're to love God and love others. And that's even what Jesus says, in the Gospels in Luke, when they come to him and they say, teacher, what must we do to be saved? And he says, well, what's the greatest commandment? And it's pretty much summed up, I think, in Luke 10, as, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And it's really hard to love your neighbor as yourself without loving God first. And so, I think that's awesome. Why it's so important.
Awesome. And again, we kind of already talked about this a bit, but to just kind of hone it in as we're wrapping up, how do these 2 commandments, or perhaps even better, perhaps even a better way to word this is, what do these 2 commandments reveal about God's heart to you?
I think it shows me his desire to have relationship with me. If he wants me to put him first, it shows that he wants a relationship with me personally. And that's at the heart of the gospel, right? Is that God wants a relationship with every single person. And so that to me is what I see in these first 2 commandments, is that desire for relationship.
This desire for relationship.
Yeah.
Is his love, because he knows what's best for us. And what's best for us is putting him first.
Exactly.
If it was anything else, he would tell us to put that first, but it's not. It's
yes.
it. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
Let's go ahead and